Welcome to Will It Work? I'm Kevin. Today we're looking at the Game & Watch Super Mario Bros. Color screen game from Nintendo. Now, this is not actually an original Game & Watch. Nintendo had a series of handheld games that came out, I think, in the 80s. I certainly owned some of them in the 80s. At one point, they were little handheld LCD games, and I don't consider LCD games to be video games. They don't have a video display, they have an LCD display, and the LCD display doesn't create graphics, where, you know, if you have an LCD that's creating actual graphics, then I feel as though, you know, graphics is more along the lines of you know, a programmable interface type of thing. I think if it was just creating graphics and it only had a single game on it, I wouldn't consider that a game system, at least in the terms of my collection. Let's put it that way. Everybody defines things differently for their own collections. For my collection, I don't. What I look for is video game or something that takes cartridges and has a graphical interface rather than LCD on there. But there's nothing wrong with LCD games. Some of them are fun. I just don't collect them, and I don't think of them as being, I don't know, I don't find them all that interesting, I guess. They're not programmable, so they're not all that interesting. I know there's probably some variations that are. But anyhow, there's a good market for Game & Watch games. So this is more of a system that looks like a Game & Watch, and it contains a full version of Super Mario Bros. On it. And but it's styled after the Game & Watch, and it has Game & Watch Ball, Super Mario Brothers, the Lost Levels, and it also will tell you the time, not to mention Super Mario Bros. So really, it's just basically, you know, more or less a Super Mario Brothers with a few extras, and that's good enough for me. I do realize that when we're looking at the sort of the definition of a game console, not all of these things are console in the sense of this sort of programmable thing that sits wired up to the TV versus, say, a handheld system that takes cartridges. A lot of times these single-player games, like these Jack-specific joysticks, these little arcade machines, these kind of handheld single-game deals, you know, not really a console. But for the sake of the count, I feel like, you know, we call these consoles, I feel like they're systems, really. And I probably should have called them all systems, but you know, when you talk about game console, people get a certain vision in their head about video games. Game system can be, that also can be a very broad term. I talk about these kinds of things a lot because I do look at my collection often and try to define what it is, because if you go too far in one way or the other, you end up in just a mess, right? And I do look at other people's lists of game systems and the history of video games and the different generation classifications, as well as the ones that, you know, the various online museums and things that, you know, they collect, etc. And we have some differences of opinion. A lot of times they'll put in things like Loopy, Casio Loopy. I don't think that's a game system. That was something for girls to play on, but I don't think it was games. And sometimes people will have the RDI Halcyon in there. I think that was more of a somebody's experiment. They made like 5 of them or something. I don't really like prototypes. I think that there's tons of prototypes out there. If it never got sold commercially, I mean, I'll take a free prototype, you know, or a very cheap prototype. But I just don't think of prototypes as, you know, the kind of thing I want to collect, because you know, you can take anything and wire some circuits around and be like, that's a prototype. I mean, there's lots of guys that make, you know, Linux boxes and say this is a Linux games machine, and etc. And this is a prototype system, and but there's some historic ones, and I understand, the importance of some of these things. If you had like a Sega Pluto, or you had an Atari 3D goggles or something, I understand. I do. It's just not what I collect. That's all. But I respect the people that do. And we're going to have differences of opinion. But for my personal collection, something like this, I would probably break my console collection down into different categories. Like I would say, these are the cartridge-based TV games that wire into a traditional television. These are cartridge-based handhelds. These are standalone systems that wire into the TV. And then we have things like this, which would be like a standalone system that's a handheld. Something along those lines. But for the sake of what we're doing here on the Will It Work, we know this one has never been opened. If you don't know, you know now. It's sealed in plastic. It's not open. And so we won't be testing it because we know it works. But I will say that, with the count, we're counting how many systems are here in total, and how many work versus not. And so for the purpose of this particular series, we're going to count this as a console, but I do recognize that in the true sense of the word, it is not one. And we're going to have a number of these types of things. I'm not going to keep talking about it. I think what I'll do is, if somebody comments and asks about it, I'll just point them to the Nintendo Game & Watch for the explanation of what we're doing here with these lists. However, I do still feel like, it's a fine line, because a lot of things like this tend to get modded in the aftermarket. And I don't know if somebody's going to waste their time tearing apart one of these to do it, but somebody out there might. And, they end up switching the games around and giving you the ability to play more games and all this sort of stuff. And then it truly becomes like a system. You're inserting memory cards and all this other stuff. So with computers and graphics and things, it's a fine line that you try to draw. And I just feel like you're advertising a video game system that I can carry around in my hand and play games on. It's a system to me, and it counts, and it's something that I would add to my collection. But I could totally see somebody else saying, I don't collect standalone, units like this. I prefer, ROM cartridge type systems or media. Some people will include computers. They like to say Commodore 64 as a game system, or Atari ST as a game system, and that sort of stuff. I think they weren't sold as that. They were sold as computers, right? They weren't marketed as game systems. There is a Commodore 64 GS, I think, that actually was marketed as a cartridge-based system in Europe or something. That is a game system, but we do have a game system based on the Commodore 64 I'll get to eventually here. But in terms of the actual Commodore 64, yeah, I own one, but I don't include that in my console list because it's a computer, and I draw the line there. Now, some people look at the Atari, I think it's the XGS or something like that, or XEGS or something like that. And we looked at that in the beginning, which is basically an Atari 800 that they reconfigured to be, a game console. And some people would say, well, that's not really a game console. It's a computer in a game console's outfit. And I would argue and say, well, it was sold as a game console. It was marketed as a game console. It takes cartridges, it has a joystick, it has a light gun, it plugs into your TV. Yes, it has a keyboard that's also detachable. But, and yeah, it's based off of a computer, but it's a game system. Just like I would say the Commodore 64 GS, even though it doesn't have a keyboard with it, it takes Commodore 64 cartridges, it's compatible with the Commodore 64. That's a game system. So, everybody's list is a little bit different. It's a fine line, but I do put a lot of thought into mine, and I just want you guys to know that you know, I don't just pick up anything at the store and be like, well, that has something on it that looks like a graphic. That must be a game system. Like, there's a lot of things that I will totally walk away from because you know, I don't collect it, and that's just, you know, there's a line drawn there. But I still feel like even against people that tend to have, you know, you collect all the Pong systems, or you collect all of the ROM cart systems, or you collect all the handhelds, my collection still stands up against them, and you're hard pressed to find somebody that has more unique systems on hand than I do in most of those categories. There's definitely, listen, there's rich people everywhere, and you can acquire anything if you're rich, and somebody out there can certainly spend the money to track down and find and build a console collection larger than my own. I don't know why they would want to, but they could. So I'm not naive. I don't think that there isn't that one guy out there, because it's the internet. There's that one guy out there who's got it all, and good for him. You know, if there's more than me out there doing this kind of thing, that's awesome. You know, I'm sure there's a lot more than me. But I'm sure what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to list all mine. I'm trying to show that they work. And if somebody else says that they have more, then let's see their list and let's see them all working. Let's not just see boxes on shelves, or, you know, consoles on shelves that may or may not work. Let's actually see the consoles working. Or if they're brand new and sealed and you seem like a trustworthy person, I'll accept that, because that's what I do. Not going to open up things that are valuable or potentially valuable just to see if they're working, because we know that they do. But there's a lot of old systems that you can open up and play test, and let's do that. And let's not look at emulators and things. Let's look at the actual hardware, and let's make sure it's working. And you know, then we'll talk, because it's easy to go out and buy a bunch of broken hardware and put it on shelves and make it look nice. It's another thing to have a whole bunch of consoles that actually function. So, rant over. I'm not going to talk about this again unless there's some reason for me to bring it up. I know I've talked about it on a few videos. I'm done with it. We all know where I'm at with this now, but I just wanted to cover it one more time, because we're getting into these little handhelds now, and we're going to see some different ones. We're going to see some with cartridges. We're going to see some with not. We're going to see little arcade single game units, etc. They're all coming, because we're going through my whole collection. People want to see the whole thing. You're gonna see it all. So, of the game consoles, not all the games. I do have a lot of games, but we're not going to go through all the games. We are going to see all the systems, and so I hope you're enjoying it, and there's a lot more to come. You're going to see some crazy stuff still. Okay, thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow with a new one.